What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Dynasty Underdog. Billy Beeman here. Got Jake Kornblum with me. No Uriah Dawkins, and that's probably my fault. I kept switching the time on these boys, and now we are a man down, much like a lot of these NFL teams who are constantly just dealing with injuries. And we'll be talking a little bit about that today. But before we do, Jake, how you doing, man?
I'm living off this serotonin rush post exercise. My whole body is still thumping after I decided to run for the first time in like 4 days. And yeah, dude, I'm thriving right now. I'm thriving. What about you? I feel like I don't ever ask you. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Very busy. Have like this executive summit thing I got to deal with at work. So this is a nice little escape from reality. Yeah, exactly. I hate that. A little escape from reality. So yeah, I'm happy to be here for sure. You do look pumped. Excited to see you.
It's just the blood. That's just the blood.
We got the big boy in here. We get XP now for watching. Dopamine. Nice. Yeah, somebody else is pumped too to be here. Excited to have you. I didn't know you get XP for watching. I'm guessing that's on YouTube. Shout out. Thank you for watching. And with that, we are going to hop into it. We just have a couple of like news and nonsense items here and then a couple topics. One of them leading into our first topic. Some good stuff today. So let's get into it. Did Chuba Hubbard get Wally pipped with this? It's a weird thing to say, right? But I feel like Chuba was, from last season on into the season, kind of the guy, and then goes down with the injury. And Rico Dowdle, who wasn't doing very much behind him for the first couple weeks of the season, looks like a superstar. He looks like Saquon Barkley out there. What is going on here in your mind?
I don't really know how you handle this as like an actual NFL coach. Like, this seems like one of those really challenging conversations that you end up having with the GM where you're like, yo, this free agent that we signed who was really just supposed to be an additional body to help out the running back room while Jonathan Brooks recovers from his ACL and other knee ligament issues. Rico is supposed to be kind of the plug and play if needed, right? And instead he's turned into an absolute stud over the 2 weeks against two of the worst run defenses, I should say, in the NFL against Miami and Dallas. It's really tough from like a dynasty perspective to understand what the roles will be once Chuba Hubbard is back. And for me, this is like one of those circumstances. If I have either body, I probably hold Hubbard and sell Rico on a high, just because I just don't really know what else to do in this circumstance. But luckily, I guess for me, I have neither of them, so I don't have to worry about it. The funny thing is I almost acquired Rico Dowdle 2 weeks ago, like on the Sunday morning before his Dolphins game blow up, where I was trying to get into Keenan Allen and him, and he was supposed to be the throw-in for some additional value. And unfortunately, Rico was somehow actually the break in that offer. So, good on the other manager. They really sniffed that one out. But yeah, what about you? Like, where do you see this kind of situation going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they don't have some sort of split even when Chuba comes back. Just looking, into the data, just one data point, everybody I think likes to look at, but definitely I think is a little descriptive of how, the players are playing. But just yards after contact per attempt, 3.49 for Rico right now, 1.89 on the season for Chuba. That's 4 and 6 games, respectively. So, take it for what it's worth, but he's breaking a lot more tackles. I wonder if there's something like, something to the fresh legs, like he obviously hasn't been getting that much work. But also, the revenge game here, two of the worst defenses in the league. Like there is something to that for sure. Like I think even Uriah mentioned that a week or two ago, they are real, those revenge games. So yeah, again, like from like a usage perspective, I think you're going to see something a lot closer to a 50-50 split when Chuba is back and like fully healthy. Maybe that's a couple weeks, whatever that may be, but that's not great for either one of those guys. It's definitely not good for what you were expecting from Chuba. So yeah, I don't know if I see Rico Dowdle's success like this continuing. We've never really seen him do this, for long stretches or any stretch really. He's definitely performed well in certain circumstances. So like personally, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I would be holding for the most part. I'd be much more willing to sell Rico. Of course, if I'm not a contender, but even if I'm a contender, like I think, I'd want to get out of this asset before the wheels fall off, heading into one of our segments here titled the same. But yeah, I think Chuba, I'd be more willing to just kind of hold on to, thinking that he's going to kind of get back to form and Rico's going to kind of, be on the down. So that's how I'm kind of viewing things there. So I don't know if he's necessarily been Wally pipped, but maybe from a coaching perspective, like they may just look at this and be like, we have to run Rico. Like that definitely could happen.
Yeah, that definitely could happen. And, Dave Canales, I think, was in a little bit of a hot seat 2 weeks ago. And now back-to-back wins definitely changes a little bit of that momentum. But because we're talking about buying and selling, I did want to shout out, in the last 24 hours, Rico Dowdle's basically going for a second. There's about 6 or 7 offers of just straight up a second. You can get a slight plus on that, second plus a fourth. There's one, Woody Marks, plus a second for Rico Dowdle. I'd be doing that in a heartbeat. Luther Burden for Rico Dowdle and Shedeur Sanders, I would be doing.
Oh my God.
There's one more I saw. Oh, Rico Dowdle plus Travis Etienne for a first. Give me the first every single time, honestly. Like, I'm all in on that.
Easily.
Even Rico Dowdle for Justin Fields. Give me Justin Fields. Like, there's just so many different pathways that you can go here. Get out of Rico Dowdle with what you can get for Rico Dowdle right now is kind of how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you basically got a waiver wire fodder that's turned into a second round plus potentially a first if you add something to it. Yeah, please give me that. So that's the actionable advice there. Okay, we can move on here. Let's talk about some injuries. We had a Puka injury, kind of came back, then kind of didn't. Then we had a egg. I like how you did this, egg Puka. I like to call him Puka, but it's not even egg. I just found that out. It's Ibuka. So Ibuka injuries. Yeah, the wide receiver injuries keep stacking up. This is brutal. Yeah, man. Like the Puka one, I don't think there's really much there, like in terms of anything to do. Like if you can go after a Puka share or two because somebody really needs the points and is going to panic on this, I guess. But like, I don't see this being long term or super worrisome. The Ibuka one just absolutely sucks, man. Like, and you're probably going to get a window here to maybe get in on him potentially, like if he's going to be out for an extended period of time. So he's where you can really, attack things in terms of these two players. But anything else here that you wanted to mention in terms of the injuries or in terms of these two players?
Yeah, I think for Ibuka specifically, where I have one build that I share co-manage with Lapasaurus, shout out. And what we did was we traded down from neighbors to get into Ibuka plus. And then of course Ibuka goes down. And now we've been trying to get into, some other shares of other players like Tet plus, a couple of we just keep trying to tier slightly down, but still get the points in that league. And I think the other people in that league have basically told us to fuck off. But I did want to shout out just a couple of options of what's going to happen specifically in that Tampa Bay room, because we know that the ball is still going to be moving. Baker Mayfield won't stop throwing the ball. I do think that Cade Otton, like we saw last year when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were down and out for the count, Cade's role grew significantly. You'll see that probably again during this window, even though Mike Evans might have a small chance of coming back this week, as well as the role of Cameron Johnson. We saw grow significantly once Emeka Egbuka was out. And also one of my favorites, even though he's a tiny man, potential MVP, Tez Johnson, in case anyone doesn't know the joke behind that. The fans in Tampa were shouting MVP to Baker Mayfield. For whatever reason, Tez thought that they were talking to him. He was so confused, told Sterling Shepard. Sterling was like, what the fuck are you talking about? They were clearly talking about Baker Mayfield. And he was like, oh, that makes so much more sense, man. And then Sterling thought it was hilarious and then told the rest of the team, which funny enough, the NFL has now archived and video footage of the whole thing. So now Tez looks like an absolute fool all over the internet. But I do want to shout out those two guys. I think Cameron Johnson is probably a free agent available in all of your leagues. Tez Johnson is probably really free, not free, but basically free to probably acquire for most teams. And I don't think a lot of people like Cade Otton anymore. So he might be a nice little fill-in to get into.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Chris Godwin got a big kick out of that story. You could see on the sideline there, but that was laughing
That's
at
about
this
right.
big boy.
Yeah.
The big boy cardiocade. I like that. That is hilarious. That's a good one. Cardiocade. Also Tony in here, just going back to Panthers. I want out of both Panthers running backs. Like you guys said, it's only going to be muddied when Hubbard gets back. Yeah, that's fair. I just think like there may be better outs on Hubbard, but I may be wrong on that. You may just be getting the same thing now that you would be getting in a couple weeks. So that's fair point. Like definitely can do whatever you want with that. Big boy, I love the way Tez handled. He was confused. He wasn't cocky. At least, no, he actually said in the video, he's like, I'm slow sometimes. So yeah, it's probably just, part of his personality. It's all good. Like it's, they're having fun out there. It's cool. Really cool. Shout for Tez. Yeah, Cameron Johnson, like if you're in the Dynasty leagues we're in, he's like basically the only thing left on the waiver wire anyway. So may as well take a shot if you want. But yeah, good shots there, Jake. Good shots. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, I wanted to talk about this a little bit, titling it the segment When the Wheels Fall Off, really just thinking about like what we would do in Dynasty leagues when injuries hit hard this early, right? I mean, obviously on rebuild teams, it's not as, it's not as important necessarily, but when well-designed teams are suffering or underperforming, like what do we do with that, right? Like it's a really tough situation, I think, sometimes to kind of navigate. And so there's a couple points here that I think we can hit on, at least from my perspective. And Jake, you can agree or disagree, obviously, but I'm just going to run through like 4 points and then we can hit on them kind of individually and dive a little bit deeper into them. But so for me, when I'm thinking about this, especially with my like more contending teams, I'm thinking like, all right, I need to not panic in this situation. And I need to kind of reassess, maybe evaluate where my teams are at. Like, is this actually a contender? And is there something I need to change here? Like, what am I doing? Just take a step back and not like, all right, just sell everything off, right? We don't really know what's happening, 4 or 5 weeks into the season. Reframe your goals, maybe depending on that reassessment, right? Like, do I need to do something different here? And can that become, what I'm excited about doing, right? Because obviously contending is what you're excited about doing. But if you can't contend, you need to get those juices flowing somehow. So that's kind of the idea there. After that, I'm thinking kind of exploit those market windows, right? Like if your team's not humming and it's due to injuries, like see if you can still improve your team in some way. And then finally, just kind of like lean into the process, right? Like the results might not be great early on, but I can even think about like our League of Legends league last year, where my team, kind of similar to this year, actually started out like probably maybe 1-4 or 2-5, whatever it may have been, right? Like whatever the record was, it was not a great record. And I ended up in the playoffs, ended up in the championship. And so it may not look great, but if you assess your team and you're like, okay, but this is a well-built team, like, and these players aren't on like, season-ending injuries type things like Malik Neighbors and like you have like all those guys, that's a different situation. But if you have guys who are coming back, George Kittles, those kind of players, it's like, all right, like I did the right thing here. Maybe just continue leaning into what I was doing, being patient, and then maybe it'll come out the right way at the end of the day. So that's kind of, where I'm thinking, where my mind goes when I'm dealing with these early season injuries, because I do have a lot of teams who CD, Kittle, maybe Mixon is on that same team. There's even more injured players on that team that I'm not even thinking of. Chris Godwin's like I have some of these teams that have like 4 or 5 of these injuries, but I look at these teams and I'm like, all right, like some of these guys are coming back. If I continue to add to this team and make it more efficient, optimize this team, it might hit at the right time at the end of the season, catch fire, and I'm in the playoffs, doing what I want to do. So yeah, with that said, we can jump back up to the beginning here if you want, Jake, or wherever you want to take it. But what are you thinking here in terms of, when the wheels were falling off this early?
Yeah. Yeah. Like Tony shouted out in the comments. Thanks, Tony. This is why
Yeah.
I share this with the group in the server, in the Discord server. Man, yeah. So my DU3 team was basically set up for what I thought was success. It's currently sitting at 4-2, kind of sitting in the middle of the pack for points for, unfortunately. Major injuries to Malik Neighbors, Brock Purdy, Najee Harris, which was supposed to be just standard running back depth. And then there's one other person that I forgot. Oh, Brenton Strange and TJ Hawkinson's just general underperformance, which has been really disappointing this year. And so this is a team that I've kind of put together and found a way to get a decent amount of draft capital kind of stacked up in and around the team. And right now, I am really kind of wading in the water, for lack of better words. Like, I think that this is the perfect window to not overextend my arm or show my hand for where this build is going to go, because I have the luxury of my record. And to Billy's point before, when you don't, you really have to better understand kind of the roster and how it's going to anticipate or proceed for the rest of the season. And I think, like, for me, most importantly, seeing how the team is scoring on a week-to-week basis is really kind of where I'm trying to gauge and also understand where the rest of the league is scoring. So more often than not during this period, I'm actually less interested in what my team is doing. It is important. It's a baseline, but I'm actually more interested in how the rest of the teams are doing in the league. So we've had some relatively impactful trades that have happened within the actual league itself. And I think that those specific trades have actually helped me better gauge where and what direction I want to go. And for the most part, I want to understand kind of the direction in which my team is able to go, depending on the pathway that I think is most realistic. So I've tried to make a couple of moves with Malik Neighbors, for instance, in a couple of different spots that just didn't pan out. And I really do believe that we play this game in a lot of different ways. And I think that, this is a common trope that I talk about, especially in our like mid-season conversations. But I really do believe that so much of the work that I do is in trying to mask my intentions with the team. So I don't know if you remember last year, but like right before playoffs actually started, even though I was in, I ended up finding a way to get into an additional 2 firsts, like right before the playoffs started. I technically made my team a little bit weaker, but I really do think that for the long run, it made my roster significantly stronger and has made my team more competitive this year, even though I've had the injuries that I have currently. And so I'm not saying that I'm going to do the same thing, but I am saying that depending on kind of how things fall into place, I do think that the general roster build itself is still a little too chaotic, and I don't feel overly committed in a particular direction. And I'm going to have to take a couple of seconds to catch up on the words that are being said in the comments.
Yeah, I got lost in the sauce there a little bit too. Oh my goodness, this is really good stuff though. It's funny. Tommy here in the comments on YouTube, Tommy Blair shout, guest last week. Good friend of the show. The last dogs in the sled dog team are called the wheel dogs. They are positioned closest to the sled in front of the musher. Each position in a sled dog team has a specific role. Wheel dogs, these are usually the largest and strongest dogs on the team. Their job is to pull the sled out of the deep snow and navigate it around corners and obstacles. Tommy says, "You're just wheel dogging, Jake."
That's really well
pretty good.
Put. That's really well
pretty
put.
Good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Oh man. And we have some good stuff in here. Big boy says, "Do all Alaskans know that?" Tommy hits you with the real ones. Of course. He lived in a sled dog community. That's amazing. Amazing stuff. Love the YouTube comments. Yeah, okay. That's really good stuff there, Jake. I want to bring it back, but now I'm lost in the wheel dog stuff. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, let's keep moving here a little bit and get back into it. Okay, so I was like, I think, and this is kind of what you were talking about here a little bit, or pieces of it, but I think, the way I was framing it to myself was like strategic patience, because with a lot of my teams, I'm like, okay, they're good, right? Like they're good to go, but at this moment, like, what can I do? Because I can't, I'm not really scoring points. How else can I kind of affect the league or impact my own team, right, in a positive way? And so I think I think you can still look to make like under the radar moves. And specifically, I think you can look for teams who, and to your point, you go and I think this is one of the biggest things that most people don't do is going into the standings, looking at the points scored, max points for, the points against, all that different stuff, kind of where your actual team is at, where your team needs to be from a scoring perspective, like an average per week. Are you actually kind of in that range, right? And then you can find some people who are frauds, right? For lack of a better term, but if you go on Dynasty Daddy, right? If their rankings, they kind of rank you as frauds or contenders, whatever it may be, you can find those quote unquote frauds and kind of try to sell them those like Kendrick Bourne type pieces or whatever it may be, right? Those flashes of hope and kind of, optimize your team, whether it's getting back, like if you can sell Kendrick Bourne for a Woody Marks or something like that, which is probably not necessarily possible, but something along those lines, right? And it may just even be for, future picks, and then you can do whatever you want with those. And that's also helping your team in some form or fashion. But that was just one thing I think you kind of hit on there, just kind of with assessing the league as well. It's not just assessing your team, assessing the league and seeing where you can take advantage of people's kind of false hopes, false confidence, and also understand where you're at and be like, all right, like, can I really do this thing or do I need to go a different direction? So, okay, good stuff there. We may be able to kind of move past this one real quick, but I do think because we haven't really hit on this, or maybe you did a little bit, but if your team isn't one of those contenders, right, and you thought it was, and you're like, this just isn't happening now, like there's just no way, right? I've lost my horses. I don't really see a good way to kind of add and get my pieces back. Again, you may have those Malik Neighbors, you may have other injuries that are going to last a little bit longer, hitting at the wrong time, whatever it is. So you're kind of like, all right, I need to reframe what I'm doing here. It's getting a little out of hand. So you can switch to obviously, stocking up on picks. But I think a big part of this whole process, right, in this area of it is like some honest evaluation, honest self-evaluation, because it's hard to do that, right? And it's hard to be like, all right, like, yeah, I need to go in this direction and go for picks instead of contend. So I think that's a big part of it. But anything you want to hit on there, Jake?
No, I think that's exactly right. And the biggest thing about reframing is something that has happened, I think, quite a bit within the conversation within the server itself. I think it actually was Big Boy, or maybe it was Miami Jeff, someone that's Canadian. I don't know. They're all the same. No, I'm just kidding. But I think like the biggest thing was that they were trying to get back into their first without basically letting the rest of the league know that they were rebuilding, right? Like the general idea was there's a pathway to get back into my first. How should I do it? Is it to acquire this specific trade that would be really beneficial for me, but would let the rest of the league know that I am no longer contending and I'm going to be rebuilding? Or is it to try and acquire said pick first and then get into that trade? And I think that really is about reframing your season goals. Is like, it's okay to do it internally, but once you do those external moves, the rest of the league is on full awareness of what is kind of important, right? So for instance, in DU4, I picked it up. It's an orphan. I've put, I think, Bijan Robinson on the trade block, I think 600 times so far this year, and I've gotten 0 offers for him. And I think it's very obvious, right? Because everyone knows that I'm rebuilding, and so I'm going to look for a ton of liquid assets, and no one wants to send 3.5 firsts for Bijan Robinson, no matter how many points he puts up for whatever reason, no matter how much he could be an infinity stone for their team, it doesn't matter because people don't want to pay the price for it. And that has a lot to do with the fact that from the onset, my team and build was very much a rebuild. So when you reframe your season goals, I think it's really important to make sure that you're masking them as much as possible, because the actual public notion of the reframing is automatically going to devalue a lot of what you're trying to do. So if you can get into multiple moves around the same time, then do that.
That's a great point, Bijan. The price is just too damn high, bro. That's what it is. But no, that's a great point. Is that they know it's not only that they know what you want and they don't want to give it to you. It's also that it limits what people would ever even want to send to you, right? Because they know that you're not
Exactly.
going to want certain assets because of what you're doing. But it's a great point. Something I probably don't even mention enough is I want to, because it's a big part of how I communicate is, if somebody is in my DMs, I'm not going to just tell them. If they ask me questions, most often they don't get answers. And I almost, like, sometimes I just don't respond because I'm like, this isn't going nowhere. You know what I mean? But like, the point being is, like, we're definitely trying to mask our intentions. And to Jake's point, as soon as you let the rest of the league know, it's going to be much more difficult for you to do. So if you can find ways before they know into those assets, especially if you're overperforming expectations and you know that, that's an even better time to do those kind of things, right? Where it's like, okay, now let me go, like you're saying, okay, let me get into my first, because they're not going to think I'm necessarily rebuilding, but I know that this team has a, better shot at going that route than a contender route. So let me go ahead and get into this first, and then you can start kind of hacking away at it there. Eventually people are going to catch on no matter what if you go hard in that direction. But yeah, if you take those baby steps too, you can definitely, I think, make some headway. Let's hit a comment here in the YouTube comments. More people need to reflect. This is a big boy. More people need to reflect on where they are within their leagues. Many managers not wanting to trade older point scoring players, example Devonta, for picks as they still think they're contending. That's a good point too. It's like even just hard to trade with certain people because they overstate their own potential, right? And so now they're not even doing what's best for their own team, right? Because they just aren't really self-evaluating in an honest way. And I think that makes everybody better, you yourself and your league mates. So it gets a lot more deals done, a lot more fluid. So yeah, everybody should definitely listen to the big boy there. That's a good point. All right, another point here. I think we've been talking about this quite a bit. So again, this doesn't need to be one we spend a ton of time on, or we can, doesn't matter to me, but exploit those market windows, right? Exploit those market windows, which we're always talking about here, trying to find those, on ramps to those high end players, those studs, right? Those Burrows injury. How can I get into Burrow for maybe Dak Prescott and something, or whatever, you can kind of come up with right now. I probably can come up with even, better value trades there, but also sell transitory value. I've talked about Kendrick Bourne a bunch, but there's a whole slew of those players. Rico Dowdle, transitory value, his value just spikes up and it's going to just kind of flutter away eventually, right? And so we talked about that at the top. There's a whole bunch of players that are going to kind of experience that with all these different injuries, even the Tez Johnsons, all those. Like, I would certainly be shopping Tez Johnson. I don't think that he's going to be – I think he's a fun player, probably will get more involved as time goes on, but also I think will be more of a spotty player, kind of a boom bust guy, that you're never going to want to really start. So if you can get off of him now with that transitory value, then that's what I'm looking to do. So I want to exploit the market windows, both in buying and selling, when I'm dealing with all these injuries, even though you may say to yourself, Tez Johnson fills a spot on my contending roster right now, or Kendrick Bourne fills a spot on my contending roster. But like in a couple weeks, when your guys come back and you no longer have room for that, or when the players just come back on those teams and they no longer perform that way, like that player is not going to provide those points for you, and you may still get a win without that player, and maybe you take a loss, but long term you're probably going to be doing what's better for your team. And still, if your goal is to make it to the playoffs, one loss, or sometimes that will happen, but I think that taking the risk on making sure you get the most value out of the transitory value that's on your team is kind of going to pan out at the end, right? And it kind of leans into the last point that I said before, which was, kind of just leaning into the process over the immediate result necessarily, right? Now, like, I think more on like a macro level, I want to say that, because it's not like always just process over results. Like, that's not, I don't want to be that guy, but I think, because that gets dangerous for sure. But from a macro level, if you're doing all the right things, you're setting your team up in the right way, you know what I mean? And you're doing these things consistently, even if you take a loss here and there, and I don't mean in terms of actual fantasy wins, but I mean loss in value and whatnot, or maybe even a fantasy win, I think your team properly built can overcome those things. And that's kind of the point. Okay. Anything on exploiting market windows now that I just yapped a whole bunch about it? Or about something? Maybe not it.
I love when you yap. Yeah, more of just a PSA to feed off of the last bit about leaning into process over results. One, great, like professional speak. I really felt the synergy there between you and corporate notion of how to communicate to colleagues as a manager. It seems like you got manager training. Is that what that was?
Not manager training, but I have a master's degree in like business and shit, and it comes through sometimes. Like it was not money well spent, but sometimes it comes through.
I have an MS in business and shit. Amazing.
That's
I
what I remember from it.
The one thing I did want to add is that, and this was actually a sub conversation that Billy and I had, I think, over text, and this is more just out there for the public. I really hope that this is helpful. But a lot of us listen to individuals who play the portfolio game. A lot of us are not portfolio players. Like even some of us who play 8 leagues or 10 leagues or 15 leagues, you're not a portfolio player. Like stop
I don't consider
thinking like a portfolio player and start thinking a little bit more about what those individual value moves look like for the individual teams. I think there's a beautiful kind of like segue or middle path between what a lot of portfolio players can do in the trades that they're making, as well as those that are in, the 8 to 10 league situation. But when we're talking about buying values, like I really do think that portfolio players play that out to the max, right? Like they're taking the smallest of value wins possible just to kind of get to the next stage of the next move so that they can continue to kind of like gradually build the value on that roster or get that specific team into a win. So that championship building roster is kind of good and done with. And then in maybe a couple of years, they no longer even own that team because it's no longer good for their portfolio. It's just not a transitory way of strategy for a lot of us that are playing because it isn't a one-to-one match. And so when we say lean into process over results, I really do think that like we need to learn from those that are playing in a portfolio manner, but don't necessarily match what they're doing on a one-to-one basis. And that would be like my biggest takeaway into lean into process. Make sure the process is your own. Make sure you're driving your own results and not feeding off of what others are telling you that this was the value that I thought was good. It's like, okay, that's awesome. Maybe that doesn't fit what I'm trying to do with my build. Maybe that doesn't fit the way that I'm playing because I'm only playing in 5 leagues that are at a $50 buy-in. It's not the same apples to apples approach that you should be making because the bets are not the same. So all in all, I love a lot of the content that comes out in the space and the community. I'm not trying to poo-poo it. I just don't think that we should be taking everything one-to-one from a portfolio mindset to that of people who are playing a little bit more casually.
That's a really great shout. Absolutely agree with that. With the portfolio stuff, like I think there's elements we can take from it. There's some really good like concepts that they bring to the table and you can utilize, I think, within your process. But I've actually done it myself, not with portfolio stuff, but with just other people's process. Like if you just do what other people say without looking at your specific strategy and process and like throwing it in there and being like, how is this going to impact like what I'm doing? And also like my league, just my league structure, format, dynamics, everything, like, does it make sense? Because somebody may be talking about, being really thin or really heavy at one position. But if you're in a league that allows a lot more flexibility, it doesn't matter. Like that shit doesn't matter to you. You know what I mean? So why would you throw that into your process in that specific league? Like it's not going to work. So you really need to be discerning with what people are telling you. And like, I think honestly, one thing we could do a better job of is kind of describing the leagues that we're talking about. I try to say that a lot of the time, which is like the leagues we're in, they're super deep. You know what I mean? They're really flexible in terms of starting lineups. Like, but I think we could be more transparent, not for lack of wanting to be, but we could just say it more often. The leagues that we're talking about, because they are, it's like super flex, tight end premium, 25, 30-man rosters, like that matters. It really does matter, especially when you're talking about kind of like the roster building element of it and whatnot. But with portfolio players, they're going to do stuff that you would never need to or want to do, take on risks that you would never need to or want to take on for different reasons. So I totally agree with Jake there. Process over results can definitely be a dangerous phrase, which is why I even on the show sheet said like macro processes. But yeah, for the most part, stay calm. I think just kind of, patience, strategic patience, those kind of things. When the injuries hit, it's easy to panic. So I would just suggest not doing that and trying to utilize some of the strategies that we were just discussing. So good stuff, Jake. Thank you for indulging me in that conversation. It's just been something I've been really dealing with this season, a little bit more than most. I guess I just have a concentration of injuries on some of these rosters that hasn't quite happened to me before, or I haven't noticed it enough to kind of want to bring it and frame it this way, but it's good stuff. All right, let's move on to your topic that you added here. This is a good one. The good, the bad, the obvious, navigating the tumultuous waves of QBs. I'm going to let you kind of jump in and lead this off. What do you got here for us, Jake?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the segue. Thanks for giving me the time and the space. I think almost feeding off of a small notion of the last topic, when the wheels fall off, I wanted to think a little bit about there's like different windows in which quarterbacks I think are valued. And you could see this in Keep Trade Cut at a pretty decent clip. Someone who comes to mind right now is probably Dak Prescott. For a long while is probably is the older version of Patrick Mahomes, but had a serious window of pretty extensive season-ending injuries that I think really ruins the perspective of his entire career, especially when you look at his current KTC value. And it's never really been able to climb too far up just because of the stigma. But what I really wanted to talk through is to the kind of name of this section: the good, meaning working off of positive reactions from the community; the bad, working off of the negative reactions from the community or media; and then the obvious, which would be when to buy in, like the QB injury window. How to kind of work through the narratives that kind of are attached to the quarterbacks that help push them up to a certain point and then bring them right back down to reality. And reality, I would just say, is whatever some type of mean value is for them as a player. And unfortunately, I think the generalized value almost has nothing to do with their scoring output. So when you think of someone like a Jared Goff or a Baker Mayfield or a current Dak Prescott, they're impacted by the stigma. Sam Darnold is impacted by the stigma. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the overall performance of the player, but what is going to happen to them in the future, because it could be anything. It could be a boat, right? The ongoing joke of the Dynasty community. And so I really wanted to start off with the obvious. Let's tie the two conversations together. When we're talking about buying and exploiting market windows, I think the best time to exploit market windows for quarterbacks is always going to be the obvious QB injury window. Right now, we're in it. We've been in it with Joe Burrow. There's been many weeks where you should have already gotten into a share, multiple shares of Joe Burrow. Maybe you're a few weeks into the injury now, and those teams that were once contending are still maybe contending, but they're throwing Carson Wentz into their super flex spot, or Mac Jones, and Brock Purdy's creeping his way back onto the field, maybe crawling based off of how San Francisco manages those injuries. Maybe he has 6 broken ribs. Who knows? Another one would be Jordan Love last year with his injury. I think pretty significant market value drop, especially right when the injury happened. I think a lot of people were very scared, me being one of them in a couple of different leagues where I have Jordan Love. I didn't trade him away per se, but I definitely maybe overpaid to get into other quarterback options, thinking he was going to be out for probably the rest of the season, which he probably should have been given his performance and how he just generally looked, pushing himself through injury. And then the last one was Dak Prescott in both last year and I believe in 2022, I think was the other year of his major injury, or maybe it was 2021. It's hard to remember with him, unfortunately. He's had a fair share of season-ending injuries. So
brutal.
The crazy thing to think about here is I think Dak Prescott is maybe the most interesting just because of what he can do as a scoring asset on any dynasty team. And when you look at his KTC value, especially last year when he got injured, you're talking about a quarterback that dropped down into equivalent of like a mid-second round value in KTC value. I don't know how many times people were trading away Dak Prescott for a second, but even getting into Dak Prescott for 2 seconds or getting into Dak Prescott for
singular first. A singular first would have been great.
Or probably at the time, Sam Darnold plus a third or something like that. Like there were spaces to do that. There was a huge uprising of Bryce Young and his value and what you could have done with that in the second half of the season. Like there were so many ways to get into Dak Prescott that the wave actually continued into the early portion of this season where we said it week 1. I was very adamant of the fact that Dak Prescott looked like himself. He looked healthy and back to normal. And I said on the first episode of this season, I'm going to buy Dak Prescott. What did I do? I bought Dak Prescott. Like, I don't fuck around. I'm very honest with everyone on this show. I bought Dak Prescott. I paid probably a little bit over market. I paid a late first and a late second for him. And guess what? He's filled right in. He starts every single week. He's probably better than Jaden Daniels has been for me and what I thought was going to be my QB1 spot. And, now my QB room looks pretty solid on that team. I think it's now Jaden Daniels, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, and Bryce Young sits there at QB4. It's like there's a way into these assets that we need to take advantage of. Is there anything you want to add on the QB injury window?
No, I mean, I feel like we've kind of alluded to it maybe from the start of this episode to the end of it, and probably some other ones too. We've talked about it a bit. It's just kind of part of this season with Burrow being injured, but also Purdy, there's windows in on that. There's probably going to be a window in on Kyler, especially given what we saw from Brissett. People might kind of relate the two and be like, well, he's trash. Let me just get out of him, and we just know from a fantasy perspective, he's probably going to have a job for a little bit longer. Going to come back and score about 20 points a game, and so like you're getting a valuable asset there. So even if you don't like the asset, and this is maybe my point here, even if you don't like the asset, because Kyler is probably an asset most of us don't love, right? Like just given we know that there's an end somewhere coming for him eventually, right? He's clearly not necessarily progressing, hitting the mark, but he's almost like Justin Fields, but like the expensive kind, right? Like the better Justin Fields in a way where it's like, it's that same thing. That the end is near, but there's plenty of runway left to kind of buy low and sell high, so that's what we need to be thinking about with a lot of these guys. But if you like them, there's definitely that window in there too. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And to your point, just because you brought up Joe Burrow again, just to shout out Dynasty Daddy trade database. There we go. As of 1 day ago, there was a JJ McCarthy and a 28 first for Joe Burrow. There was a Joe Burrow for 2 firsts and a second. Joe Burrow. There was Joe Burrow for Devon Achane and Mike Evans. Joe Burrow. There was Joe Burrow and a second for Jordan Love. Joe Burrow. Like, go get Joe Burrow if it looks like that. Like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. I didn't mean to cut. I don't need to cut you off for any reason. I don't know why I was cutting you off.
You got so excited by the words.
No, I have something to say, but like, I don't.
Go ahead.
In need of you stopping talking. My brother-in-law reached out to me and was like, "Would you sell Stroud for Burrow?" And I was like, and he's on a rebuilder, obvious, but it doesn't matter. I said 1,000. My response was immediately 1,000%. But the fact that like in his mind it was even a question means that that kind of thing can get done in some realm, whether you're adding or whatever it is, So like, yes, go buy Burrow because people out there are thinking the craziest things and they might get done in your league. That's the thing. Like he's not in a league that's like listening to most podcasts and shit like that. Like, it's like their friend's Dynasty league or whatever. So they might just sell Burrow for Stroud because they're contending and need a healthy body and aren't really thinking of the consequences down the road. So definitely always try these things out. Know your league, know your league mates, know who you're sending it to, and send a fair enough deal for it to not be offensive. But yeah, like get it done.
Yeah, sweet. I think that's really great feedback. Let's jump into the next portion, the good. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. So just jumping into the next portion, the good,
Yes,
working off of
I know
positive
my internet is
reactions.
fucked.
Sweet. Working off of positive reactions from the community. So, for instance, we're talking about Jane Daniels last year creeping all the way up into QB1, QB2 territory. We're talking about Drake May. Currently, he's sitting right now, I believe, at QB5 for KTC. These are circumstances where I say at all available times to get out of those assets. Like, almost every single time when these young quarterback assets creep up to these upper echelon of value arcs, it's almost the perfect time to now get into the top tier quarterbacks that are kind of being faded. And so in this current circumstance, we're just talking about current. Some really interesting ones that are getting usurped by Drake May, for instance, is someone like a Patrick Mahomes, who oddly enough is scoring incredibly well on a weekly basis. Joe Burrow is another one who has been usurped by Drake May. We're also talking about someone like Baker Mayfield, where I think you can probably get a first, maybe even a second on top of Baker for Drake May. You're talking about that's probably about like the group that I would say, but that's three pretty solid options to get off of Drake May or Jaden Daniels into what I would say are going to be assets that will probably have a little bit longer value. Already, Jaden Daniels has creeped back down to QB3 behind Lamar and Josh Allen with a pretty big value gap on KTC. And I know KTC isn't the gospel. I don't want to talk about it like it is the gospel. I'm not trying to tell you that the values on KTC are the gospel, but it is a relatively live illustration of what the market does believe the values are for these individual players. So that being said, there isn't all that much to add there, but really just trying to understand what kind of the off ramp looks like and when is too high for an individual quarterback and how to kind of tier back, quote unquote, down, but almost either to the side or up based off of how the market is interacting with those individual players and their growth. Do you have anything to add there, Billy?
Not really, but how dare you on Drake May? I can't believe you would you would do that. No, like I honestly I think you kind of nailed it on all of that with the good. You definitely need to. I mean, you could just see it with any of these guys with Jaden Daniels, all that. They never necessarily reach this height again. Like they can, but like it's nearly peak what their value is ever going to be. So you may as well just get out.
Yeah, I think that's really, really great feedback. And just kind of pushing into this last segment where it might be the hardest piece to gauge, which is going to be the bad. So working off of the negative reactions from the community or media. And a couple of examples here are going to be value declines in player performance. So we had value in, like we talked about, Jordan Love last year. That was player performance related, but it was also slightly injury related. You also had Mahomes post Super Bowl after basically just being on the ground for a total of 60 minutes. I think people really, really lost their minds. The dude made it to the Super Bowl. He had one of his worst offensive performances for the entirety of the season, and everyone wanted to blame Matt Nagy. I get it. I understand the narrative, but at the same time, I think that we have to look at the historical lens of the professional athlete and understand that it could have just been a blip year and not getting scared off of that. And we've already seen early this season, there's nothing to be afraid of with Patrick Mahomes. The next are going to be a little bit more challenging. We have the Bryce Young effect, where Bryce Young gets benched due to being poor or not being poor fiscally, but being poor performance-wise. And then you can also bring in Anthony Richardson into that grouping, and you can also talk about Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, Kyler Murray. The list goes on for the bad, right? And I really do think that the piece here is trying to differentiate the players with the historical context and the new up and coming players that have fantasy output but don't have NFL performance. And let's talk a little bit about that. So when I say fantasy performance, but not NFL impact, I am looking at someone like a Justin Fields or an Anthony Richardson. Like, and I mean that with no ill will to either of the players themselves, but this is an ongoing debate that we somehow come to almost every single season where players will perform incredibly well. They'll score many touchdowns. They'll run many yards. They'll throw even a couple 100 yards in a game. And the perception of them is almost completely masked by the reality that either they're incredibly inefficient, they don't know how to move around the pocket. Some of their completions were due to completely broken plays. The defenses are playing against their rushing impact. And so there are multiple spaces and abilities to take advantage of them, which they are unfortunately only able to do at a very, very small clip because they're just not particularly very good. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, the inability to show the consistency to do that thing. Like we always think about this, like ceiling value, right? We always think about that asset can score this amount of points because I've seen it happen. They're going to do it again. And so when we talk about the historical lens, like I'm not talking about the isolated performances. We're talking about season-long performances from like star caliber players. We talked about multiple quarterbacks like a Patrick Mahomes or a Dak Prescott. We're talking about players who have been able to do it for the entirety of the season. Like one of the
in
few
multiple
players
seasons and
in
multiple
multiple
seasons. Let's
seasons.
be
Yes, thank you.
very clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
In multiple seasons. And I think one of the most interesting individuals who's been able to come out of the quote unquote bad, working off of the negative reactions from the media, has been a Baker Mayfield, has been a Jared Goff, where their fantasy performance almost usurps their fantasy value almost every single season. You're able to acquire them at an incredibly cheap clip on a regular basis, regardless of how they perform in your individual leagues. So
is that because the stigma carries with them?
I think so. I think, the stink sticks. I think everyone believes
and
that.
Sam Darnold may be part of that group. Well, he may not be. We'll see. We had our questions about him, certainly, but he seems to be proving so far the haters wrong.
Definitely. Who knows? Maybe Daniel Jones ends up being part of that conversation in a few years. Like that's the thing is like we can't come to these conclusions quickly. And I think everyone wants to make snap judgments about it. So instead, here's the advice that I provide and the reason that I bring up the bad. The bad always has an acquirable level, no matter how bad they are. A starting quarterback in a Superflex league is going to have value. So if the bad ever gets to a point where you have a basis for acquisition, go acquire. Doesn't matter what the profile is. I personally don't care. It could have been Will Levis, because Will Levis, at the end of the day, at some point, was incredibly acquirable, and there were still people in leagues that thought that there was a possibility for him to still be an NFL quarterback. And guess what? There are still people who are tweeting about this shit online that I don't believe are bots. They could be, but I don't believe they're bots. I don't believe that they work for a mayonnaise company. They might work in the mayonnaise industry. I don't know.
Big Mayonnaise is pushing Will Levis.
Dude, Big Mayonnaise and their insane saturated fats, they're coming after America. I'm just telling you right now. No other country has a mayonnaise issue like America does. But
that's for fucking sure. I can tell you that. Oh my God.
But in all sincerity, like I do think that no matter how shitty the quarterback is, there's always a window to acquire back into. This is probably an amazing window. Anthony Richardson is injured again. What can you get him for? A third? I like maybe 2/3. I think it's worth acquiring at that cost. I think Bryce Young last year, you could have gotten him for peanuts when he was benched. People thought his career was over. And now you can probably, at one point of last year, he's going for a first plus. He's probably now back down to a first. But that's kind of the way that you have to work through these windows. Sam Darnold was 2/4 2 years ago. Then last year on Minnesota,
he was on the waivers. He was on waivers in some leagues, bro.
Mac Jones is
same with Carson Wentz, who's starting.
Exactly.
He was on waivers. Like it's, and if you could turn that, to Jake's point, into anything like a first, I mean, what are we doing here? You need to be taking looks at these players, to Jake's point, like acquire them. And like we're all off of Anthony Richardson at this point, but he's right. Like at a third or a fourth or whatever the cost is at this point. I mean, he just got injured from a
Warming
workout
up.
band. A workout band hit him in the eye, and I think he has an orbital fracture. Like, dude, like nobody has ever had injuries like this guy has had injuries, and like still there's probably going to be a point where he gets a resurgence in dynasty value, and even if not, it's burning a fourth or whatever it's going to be is worth it, given what we've seen from Sam Darnold, from all these different from Justin Fields getting the second, third, fourth chance somewhere new. It's definitely worth it. And I think one thing, and I don't know if you finish off your thought on this, I do want to hit it before we move on, but
Go for it.
You were talking about differentiating between a Justin Fields and a Bryce Young, two negative narrative players, right? For sure.
Yep.
But not the same. Not the same. Same, but different, but still the same. No, not really. They're different. They're fucking different. Like, Bryce Young shows flashes of competent QB play. Justin Fields gets praised for his completion percentage, but he doesn't throw the ball into any risky situation, take any chance downfield, because he kind of can't. Like, he knows it's probably not going to be where it's supposed to be. It could end up in a pick. And that's why he's not throwing the ball. Bryce Young is taking chances in tight windows and reading the field and progressing a little bit here and there. Now, incrementally, it's not where you want it to be, but there's two clearly different development paths going on here, and they're not the same at all, even though they both have really, I think, negative stigmas about them, and both are acquirable at some level too. But definitely, I think a difference there, a distinction that needs to be made, and it's definitely your point. I just wanted to make sure that we hit on it because we kind of went halfway there.
No, you alley-ooped the shit out of that, and I loved it. No, I don't think there's anything else I really wanted to add, except for just this closing remark. I really do think that there's such thing as the good, the bad, and the obvious of how to move through quarterback narratives. And when you are trying your best to get it right, you will probably get it wrong. It's more so about understanding that there are going to be very, very obvious off-ramps of every single quarterback, especially young ones. And it's really, 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 really important to stop getting greedy and thinking to yourself that you have the next big shit, because it's probably still stuck in your stomach. And the reality is that you need to continue to just revamp that quarterback room to make sure that you're getting those top 5 quarterback assets, because those are going to be the true quarterback assets. Those are going to be the ones that are going to have the most longevity. They're going to score you the most amount of points, and they're going to give you that idea of what a true dynasty is going to look like. So I think that's really how you move through and navigate the tumultuous waves of the quarterbacks.
That's really good wrap up. The good, the bad, and the obvious. Definitely got to keep that in mind for sure. Also, last thing on that I do want to say, because I said it in the last segment, but I think it applies here as well, is like, you got to get over not acquiring players because you don't like them or because they're dynasty assets, especially when it comes to QBs, because we've seen time and time again with these guys, if you let them hit waivers, eventually they're going to end up on somebody's roster and starting again somehow. Like, that's just kind of the nature of this position with anybody who's like a semi-competent QB in this league. And so, especially if they have any kind of first round value attached to them, like, then, I mean, what are we doing here? You got to hold on to them. You got to just ride the waves. At least don't let them hit waivers. That's for sure. We've seen that too many times. But acquire players that you don't like. Like, I wouldn't say do that at a high clip or do it all the time, but don't be afraid, I guess. Don't be afraid to acquire players you don't like, and you should be going after them when they're super, super great values. Like, that's when you really can't be afraid of those guys. And I'm guilty of it myself, but the more that you get over that, the more you like Jake was saying, it's like, you can't pick and choose this shit. You do need to kind of spray at this thing, right? And acquire as many of those guys as possible, because you don't know which one's going to hit. And once it does, you're going to be really happy that you kind of made those bets at the low values. So, okay, great stuff there. Let's get out of here with some trades and non-trades. We have a bunch of DU trades that hit, and thank you for everybody, including Jake, for sticking with us through the internet issues that I'm clearly facing. He's actually kept it going for us and probably haven't noticed much, but thank you. Okay, let's hit on it. Trades and non-trades. Bunch of DU trades. Let's start with DU2. This is almost all of these are from our listener leagues, if I'm not mistaken. So really cool stuff here. DU2, we have Stafford plus Noah Fant for Travis Etienne. That better not be Trevor. Stafford plus Fant for Travis Etienne. Like, I thought this was a different player you did this with. Maybe this is a different league that you did it with too, but I'll give me the starting quarterback. Like, what are we doing here?
This isn't me, but yeah.
No, but you made a trade with sending a running back for Stafford, and it was Woody Marks, right? And something,
Yeah,
or
it was Marks for Stafford plus Ollie Gordon. Yeah,
how does that fucking feel today?
great.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it felt
fantastic.
great when it happened, to be honest. And the best part,
I
I think I
know.
told you, the league chat shat all over us. That's our
That's
co-managed team, and there was like, "I'll take Marks every single day." I was like, "Yeah, okay, great."
Will you take him today on the 14th? Because I want Stafford still. And so I feel the same here. This is a pretty easy one. As as much as it's not even a really trying to trash Etienne or anything. It's just an easy deal for Stafford, and Fant's just a throw in. DU3, we have Lamar for. Okay, sorry, let me reel it in here. DU3, we have Lamar Jackson for Dak Prescott, Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, and a 26 late second. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Honestly, this trade internally made me so upset when I saw it that I couldn't grasp what was going on, because this is one of those conversations, and I loved the timing of this. Last week on the Superflex Super Show, shout out John Hogue and shout out Tommy Blair. They had an amazing conversation about kind of the navigation of dynasty value versus actual scoring points, and like how do you kind of find the homeostasis or the equilibrium between the two for the most success for your build. And I think these types of trades are trying to go down that path, but then like completely lose the idea that you're acquiring two assets that are probably dead in 1 to 2 years max, and a late second which is going to have a hit rate of basically zero. And you are, to me, long-term trading Dak for Lamar. And it's like, yeah, Dak's scoring right now is incredibly solid, but you're not going to be able to continue to get the same fantasy and dynasty value out of Dak moving forward. So like, you're playing a really weird game, as well as the idea that you've sat on Lamar for the last X number of weeks injured and didn't get these points before. Like, if you were so willing to get into the point side, do it earlier. Like, there's something really odd here that like just didn't add up to me. And it was one of those trades that I just don't really kind of get the logic. But if it works out, it works out. And like, I do think that this is one of those where I might be eating my words at the end of the season, because it's like, oh, Kelsey's a top 4 or 5 tight end performer, and Stephon Diggs somehow creeps into the top 15 if he stays healthy. Dak is a top 6 scoring quarterback. That there's a world where this trade looks really good on one side, but then once again, the window shuts at the end of the season, and you still lose out on all that value from the Lamar side. So I don't know. You talk me through it.
Yeah, I mean, I got the Lamar side, so I obviously feel similarly. I mean, this probably lost me a game this week, and could potentially, my team is a little fragile, but definitely has, I think, quite a few players, pretty deep with some pretty good players. So I think with the right foundation, it can kind of get back to contending pretty quick, or even contend this year a little bit. But with this trade, I think it kind of makes me, acquiring Lamar, knowing that like I'm down to kind of just, I think it was Jaden Daniels and Lamar now are my 2 QBs. So I'm going to be down to QB for at least another week, and probably hurts my contending window. Like, I'm like, all right, I'll just probably spin it back around for next year and try to build off of this. You know what I mean? That's my vision of it. I will say, like, I saw this trade go to Twitter, and I saw some people talking about it, and they were like, yeah, if you're contending, Dak side, you know what I mean? So like, I think that there are a lot of people who would consider that a fair-ish trade, though I like, there's no way that anybody knowing me knows that I would look at 2 of those assets and be like, they're probably on the way out. So like Jake said, you're kind of like, I'm basically, I turned value that was going to disappear into value that will remain on my team through Lamar Jackson, right? And so that was my view of it. the other person is obviously contending, and so they're just trying to ride this wave to a championship. And I think if that gets them there or even close, then it was somewhat worth it. But we'll see over the long haul. Like, what I would think the other side needs to do to make this worth it is move off of Kelsey and Diggs before the end of the season for some kind of value and still contend. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they would have to do, I think, to really make this worth their while, which is possible for sure. But I totally would have added a bunch more to the other side if it was me, if I were trying to sell Lamar. That's just me personally. Okay, let's move on here. DU4. We have Josh Jacobs.
Just really quickly.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Jump back in.
I did want to just shout out that before this trade went down, I actually sent out a similar trade in another league where I'm rebuilding. My other quarterback happens to also be Jay Daniels, funny enough. And so I sent out to a contender, Dak plus Rashee Rice, which I think is a significantly better package than Dak plus Kelsey plus Diggs, just from like
value and
you didn't even have to sit on the 6-game suspension. So you got that little bump, and you realistically will probably get similar scoring to at least one of those two assets with significantly longer dynasty value on both Rice and Dak for Lamar. And it got rejected. But I will say that the owner did come back to me a couple of days later after seeing Dak perform well again and said, maybe I snap rejected that too soon. Like, I apologize. Maybe we can kind of reconsider it. And, it'll be interesting to see if that trade actually does happen now. But I just wanted to shout that out because I did feel like that was technically better dynasty value, but got rejected when I was trying to get Lamar instead of that coming in as like an inbox offer. So just a heads up.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you on the value side of things. Also, just to the trade piece, one thing we didn't say, and one thing I think the other manager, I don't know if they considered or not or cared, but like, Rashee Rice coming back may hurt Travis Kelce's value. So his his productivity may have been transitory. Talking about transitory value, he may be dealing with some transitory productivity that may decline as they've been dealing with a whole bunch of injuries too in their receiving core. So like, as just players and everybody gets healthy, I think that there's a potential that happens with Kelce. So just something to consider there. Always think about why the players are scoring the points they're scoring if they're going to be sustainable. Okay, DU4, another DU4 trade. Jordan Love. Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't even get to the first DU4 trade. DU4. We have Josh Jacobs for 28 first, Khalil Shakur, and a 28 fourth. So Josh Jacobs, 28 first, Shakur, and the fourth. I'm going to personally take the pick side of this. I haven't found a window where I could get out of Josh Jacobs for that much. I had to take a little haircut, I think, to get out of him in one league. We probably talked about that last week. So, yeah, I'll take the pick side of this. I think that's really good return for Josh Jacobs and kind of what you should be getting for his productivity, though I personally wouldn't pay for it necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those deals.
Yeah. No, I love this trade for a couple of reasons. One, shout out to the owner or former owner of Josh Jacobs. They posted, "Why can't I sell this guy?" in the chat after putting him on the trade block again, and probably after sending out a bunch of offers to people and got a trade done. I think it was within like 30 minutes of saying that. And so sometimes you just have to ignite the rest of the group. I do think that a 28 first is so far out that a lot of people kind of just see that as nothing to trade away, and you get the points in the interim. But I do think that Josh Jacobs, to kind of the point that you were alluding to, is kind of playing that fuzzy game of when do the wheels fall off. And, we're playing with production for the time being, but when does that end? It could very well end in 2028, but it could also end in 2026. And you might have a dead asset and you gave up first, what I would say in Shakir is a second and a fourth. So I go pick side personally, but I totally understand the logic on both teams. And I think the team that acquired Jacobs is definitely going to be a pretty strong contender this year. So best of luck to them. Yeah.
And Jacobs has been inefficient with spurts of efficiency. Like, he's definitely had, good moments, but like, there's been, I think, a lot of efficiency masked by touchdowns and, good team performance, but neither here nor there. Good deal. The other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if anybody saw this, pretty cool though. Josh Jacobs, whenever he gets tackled, he laughs. I don't know if anybody saw that video of him. just like cracking up at every time like he's in a pile of people. He's like, ha. You're just like, what? This guy is absolutely a psycho. But I guess you kind of have to be to play that position. All right, DU4. We have Jordan Love for Jordan Addison. So Jordan Love for Jordan Addison, Colson Loveland, and a 27 second. Give me the quarterback, please and thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate any of those assets on the other side necessarily, but I don't think they add up to a quarterback personally. We have no idea what Loveland will be. Maybe he hits his potential. Maybe he doesn't. A 27 second. Okay. And yeah, Jordan Addison, like that's just a bunch of middling, middling dynasty values in my opinion. And Jordan Love's great and will be a steady asset for you. So yeah, I don't got really much else on that.
Yeah, this was my trade. The only thing I'll add is because last week I took up a semi-segment, a chub, a half chub. Sorry.
We're tracking time in chubs now. Jesus Christ. Oh God. We're definitely getting towards the end of the show here. You can tell.
Yeah. The runner's high is either coming on or rubbing off. Can't tell. But
oh my.
Yeah. Oh, I see what I did there, or what you did there. Yeah. So the other thing I would add is that this is a build where I am rebuilding. I'm tanking. And one of the things I loved about this trade is I talked about how I traded away Ashton Janty and George Pickens for Baker Mayfield, and I probably overspent a little bit on Baker Mayfield's a first and 2 seconds. But what this actually does is it now makes my QB room even more heavy in a league that I think the quarterback value was unfortunately very all over the place. So now sitting with Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, and Baker Mayfield looks significantly better than just Justin Herbert 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And additionally, only 2 of them can accrue points to my max PF. So I technically remove Jordan Addison and Colston Loveland from ever hitting my max PF. And now I just have those 3 quarterbacks vying for who's going to score the most. So instead, I now have, frickin' Fram fighting for it. I don't know who the fuck those people are. Bones, as I said last week, like I have literal pieces of poop sitting somewhere on my bench that are scoring, -6 points that are now going to hit my lineup. And it's like, that is how I want to be rebuilding. I make the dynasty value on my team extended. I build up my quarterback room to where I want it to be. And now I'm directly impacting the market the way I want it to be, because when some of these other owners are going to be looking at quarterbacks who have, a Matt Stafford or an Aaron Rodgers next offseason, those quarterbacks are going to be looking mildly expensive for some of those teams. So, that's just something to think about when you are rebuilding. Like, this is how I personally like to rebuild. I want to rebuild from the very, very tippity top. I want to add that value all the way to the tippity top. I love young assets. Like, it's so much fun to play that game. But if someone else loves them more, give it to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just final comment. Anytime you can receive a high-end quarterback back without giving one in return, like that's going to be most of the time a smash deal, unless you're moving like Jamar Chase for, what I mean, like for a quarterback, something like that. But if you're moving like a couple guys for a like top 10, 12 dynasty quarterback, like that's almost going to be a smash every time. So like anybody who's not getting a quarterback back is, I think, missing the mark. Okay. DU4. A lot of DU4 trades. Wow. A lot of DU4 trades. DU4, we have Kendre Miller plus Kendrick Bourne for a 28 second and a third. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about right here. This is what you got to do. Give me the picks on that. That's getting out of guys with transitory value. Kendre Miller, I mean, that team is in such a transition period themselves. He may never just see a time where there's like a good team around him to even perform well, if you even like him. I don't even really like him that much. I don't think he's, that talented and doing very much anyway. And then Kendrick Bourne, we already know the story of his career. It's literally this every time. It's like, this roller coaster ride of like, he'll be a guy when there's nobody there who dominates. And then when everybody gets healthy, he's nowhere to be found, again. So it's kind of the story of his career. Yeah, I think the picks on this is pretty easy.
Agreed. I got the picks, so I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I would too. All right, DU4, another DU4 trade. Yeah, it looks like maybe some cascading trades going on in this league. People just feeling the energy flowing down from the prior trade before. DU4, we have Brees plus Flowers, Brees Hall plus Zay Flowers for 26 first and a 28 first. It's a good trade. It's a good trade. I don't know. I kind of like. I don't think Flowers, like, obviously Flowers is a tough asset to roster. So it's pretty good getting a first for him, but it feels like Brees should be more expensive here. So yeah, I mean, it's a good trade all around. It depends on what you're doing with your team for sure. I don't know, man. I kind of like the player side of this, just feeling like I can, but it's going to be hard to get one of those first back. Like, if you know what I mean, like at the end of the day. So you got to, like, you're hoping that Brees picks up a lot of steam eventually, and you can get out for a first plus something. And so that'd be the idea here. It's a risky deal. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. It is a tough one. I think I like the liquidity on the picks more than I like the players. And I personally, like, I'm not the biggest Brees Hall fan, but I do think that this is probably selling him low as well as selling Zay low. But I do think from, like, making sure that you have assets that have no stink on them, getting into the first kind of makes sense to me, especially when you think about how that build is. So that specific team that's trading away Brees and Flowers is definitely in a rebuild. They've been in a rebuild, and I think they've just kind of accepted it over the last few weeks when the rest of the team just stopped performing. I want to say they also have Lamar. So it just has not gone well for them. I also want to say that they may or may not have sold out of Zay Flowers as well in another league that we are with them. They happen to be a Ravens fan. So there's probably something there that they know and have seen that they want to get out for, like I said, the liquidity. So all of that to say, this is one of those tough trades where I think you can get some probably like player performance out of this as the acquiring team, but I don't know if you'll really ever see those values again unless they have like another big boom week and then you get out for maybe a little bit plus on top of that. Like, maybe there's a world where Justin Fields gets benched and Tyrod Taylor is the starter and the ball moves a little bit more fluid, and Brees is equivalent to like a first and 2 seconds, and you can get out of Flowers for maybe a first plus a third or something like that after Lamar comes back. But like, no, that's not happening.
Not possible. It's not. And I'm like, that's the thing about this. Like, I mean, you've convinced me. Didn't take much. Trust me. On the pick side here, because like this trade, like the person who traded the picks away is like probably like I traded like a first for Brees and a first for Flowers. The person getting the picks is definitely like, I got 1.5 for Brees and 0.5 for Flowers. You know what I mean? Like, that's because when you own Flowers, you understand that getting a first for Flowers without being in a package is not possible. That's not possible. Nobody trades a first for Flowers. They don't. He is like, that is the kind of player he is, unfortunately. So I do agree with you, because you're going to need to be able to get out of Brees for nearly 2 firsts, like you basically said, to make this, to not be stuck with these players at the end of the day. And so that's going to take a bit of time because Justin Fields is there. So it's tough, but yeah. So I think we agree. We're on the first side of it, but it's a good deal. Like, it's definitely a good deal. And I can see a world where you can get out on the other side. And I'm sure in some league you can get a first for Flowers, but not in mine, not in the ones I'm in. All right. DU5. You could feel the pain. DU5. Oronde Gadsden plus Darren Waller for I almost said Cole Strange. Brenton Strange. Yeah. You can tell I'm a Patriots fan because probably nobody knows who Cole Strange is. Oronde Gadsden plus Darren Waller for Brenton Strange. And this is a tiered PPR league? Or is that the next one? This is tiered PPR?
No, they both are.
Okay, so it's 175 for all these guys. 1.75. Oh yeah, we're DU5. What am I talking about? Okay, yeah, 1.75 for the tight ends. Aronde Gadsden plus Darren Waller for Brenton Strange. Whatever, I'll take Aronde Gadsden and Waller. I don't know, like it. I feel like Gadsden's upside is basically Strange, and Strange's upside isn't enough for me not to just take like the points and the potential on the other side. That's kind of how I'm feeling. But like, I mean, you could convince me otherwise because I don't love either of those other guys, and like Waller's going to be nothing after this year most likely. But you could probably get, if you sell both those guys, you could probably get more than Strange if you do it fast. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you talked through the exact logic of the person who sold Gadsden and Waller. They are in like the super tank mentality.
Yeah,
Strange going on to IR, I think, is just like one of those additional pluses. And
that's a
so,
huge one. Yeah.
to your point, it's like remove the points. Strange maxes, or sorry, Gadsden maxes out at Strange. Strange is Gadsden, and I don't really want Waller's points on my team. And I've probably tried to trade him for, a second or 2/3, and people have told me to fuck off. So I'm now at this point where I just really want the points off, and I get a redeemable Dynasty asset in a 1.75 tight end premium, or sorry, a 0.75 tight end premium, 1.75 PPR for tight ends in a league where maybe he has a little bit more value than a lot of others think, versus playing the game of what does Gadsden do for the rest of his career. Waller, to your point, he's probably living in a 6-month bubble, and then will probably retire again because his hip will fall off of his body. And so, yeah, like that's going to be the way that it works.
Yeah, notice he's barely been hit. It's all been like end zone, touchdowns. Like he's just wait until he actually gets hit one time. Let's see what happens. But no, I definitely vibe with that logic. I think that makes a lot of sense. And when you definitely got to talk through like, oh, the guy's on IR, I'm a rebuilder. He's not scoring points. Ceiling is basically the same for these two sides. It's like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Context matters a lot. Okay. Another one in DU5, again, tiered PPR. Tyler Algier for 28th third. Algier has to be the least talked about player in all of fantasy and dynasty. Like I feel like his name is never spoken on any podcast. This may be the first time his name was spoken on any podcast in the last. No,
Superflex Super
it's
Show. They talk about him all the time.
Like good shout out to them because
shout out to Tommy.
Shout out,
yeah,
because he's not talked about much anywhere else. So definitely shout out Tommy and the Superflex Super Show for that. I actually think he should be a more valuable asset than people probably think of him as. I mean, he is literally next in line and gets touches anyway to Bijan Robinson in a pretty run heavy offense. So yeah, like he for sure should be valued for a 28th third. Yeah, like I think this is a fine trade either way. I don't know. I didn't actually look at the context of this. I'm wondering if the person acquiring Algier is the Bijan owner. Which, if that's the case, do your thing, whatever. I feel it. Also, it kind of feels like Algier's value has the potential, just as we're talking about it right here, to increase significantly from this point. So it's like, if you're going to spend a third on a player, like there's worse players you could spend a third on, if that makes sense. So like, I kind of would take Algier here, but I can't fault you for taking a third, I guess. It just feels like a cheap price for a really valuable handcuff.
Yeah, this is like one of those trades where like context is so important. Like someone sends you a random offer like this, because that's probably what this was. This doesn't feel like there was a lot of negotiating here where a 28th third was like, oh, that's the piece I want, So this definitely feels like it was just like an inbox offer, and the person was like, oh, that's good value. No, look at why they want him. Like, this is a prime example. Yeah, this is the Bijan owner.
This is the Bijan. Why else would anybody trade for Algier? Really? Like, yeah,
the Bijan owner doesn't get to have Tyler Algier. Like, that's it. You don't give them Tyler Algier. You wait until Bijan's injured, and then you sell Tyler Algier. What are we doing? Like, there is no reason to sell the Bijan owner basically a free stake. You just gave him a free stake. Like, this is what I'm talking about.
Or you sell him overvalued. Like if they're going to overvalue him and they're going to send you like a second or something, maybe like you're like, yeah, like that makes sense. Like this is enough risk to get out of like, what was I going to get for him anyway? It's like, that makes sense, but this doesn't.
Exactly. And like, that's why, we talk about this so much, but there is a lot in this game that you just take the 5 seconds and you check out the other team's roster. Like just go into the counter function. You don't even have to, you're on sleeper, you hit counter, they don't get a notification. You go into counter, check their roster, check the assets that they have. Oh, you have Bijan? Guess what? Tyler Algier is now quadruple the cost. Like, I'm not going to give him away for fucking free. Like, what the hell are we talking about?
And you could say that to the person too. Like, you own Bijan. I'm not going to give him away to you for free right now. Like, if you want him, send me something. Send me an offer I can't refuse. Is pretty much how you say it. Send me an offer I can't refuse, because this right here, all I'm thinking is when he's injured, I'm going to sell him for more than this to you. So, like, let's not beat around the bush here and let's get it done, or let's just move on. And so, yeah, like that has to be the mindset with this, because like, I'm not making the deal at all. And just looking at the deal, my mind said to me, the person trading for this must be the Bijan owner. You know?
And honestly, it's
like,
super heady if they're not, to be honest. If you're not the
Yeah.
Bijan owner and you're making a move like this, like, that's fucking sharp. Like, you're getting ahead of the curve, because also, we talked about this, Bijan had over 300 touches last year, right?
Yeah, it's very possible that we see an injury for sure.
I don't want to be that guy, but like,
yeah.
It's there. It's there. And the last thing I will say is that the worst part is that Tyler Algier, for whatever he is, a 30% snap share type of guy, he has had 4 out of his 5 games over 10 plus carries. In 3 out of his 5 games has scored over 10 points. Like, that's not even a 3rd round pick. Like, that's
crazy.
more than
I
a
didn't
3rd
know
round
that.
pick. So like, just look at the
he has
assets
3 touchdowns on the
man.
year. He has 3 touchdowns on the year, dude. Yeah. And he's averaging probably over 3. Did I say something else? Yeah, 3 touchdowns.
No.
But he also has, I think he's probably averaging over 3.5 per carry, probably close to 4. So he is again, run heavy offense. He's already getting touches. He's not just a handcuff. He is definitely a guy who has standalone value in a way, right? Not that you'd want him in your lineup every week, but certainly a flex fill in on bye weeks, whatever it may be, and absolutely a super high value handcuff. So to Jake's point, like, you just can't give these guys away for free. And, to my point or whatever at the beginning, what I was saying, even with not knowing the context of it, like, a third for Tyler Algier feels like an asset that's going to increase in value enough at some point to get that plus back. So it's just it's a pretty heady trade for whoever traded for Algier, and obviously they're the Bijan owner, so they got it very cheap. So shout out to them. And another example of why you go and check league standings, your league mates rosters during trades, like all these different things that seem like minor details or throwaway trivial things. They're really not, actually, in the thick of it, when you're in season, when you're scoring points, when your opponents are trying to acquire assets from you. You need to try to understand why, and they're not going to tell you. Just like us, we're not going to tell you. You hop in and ask me, I'm not going to tell you why I want Tyler Algier. You know what I mean? At least not honestly, exactly. So you're going to need to go and look at my roster and think about why I'm going to need Tyler Algier. So, excuse me. So, just something to leave you all with after what I think was actually a really fun show. Had a lot of actionable stuff in it. So thanks for everybody who stuck with us. Thank you, Jake, for being here as always. Any final remarks from you before we get out of here?
No, I love you.
No, we love you too. Wait, did we go through? Okay, we did go through all the trades. I thought I missed some. I love you too, Jake. We all love you.
There's so many. There were so
I know.
many.
I know, it's crazy. But all right, with that, thank you for everybody joining us on YouTube. Please get in the Discord if you're not there. The link is in the show description every week. Other than that, find us on the socials at Dynasty Underdog, and we'll be back next week. Peace out, people.